I want to show you something. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the US debt clock. Let me fix my mic 1 second. This is the US debt clock. This is something I kind of look at from time to time, maybe about 2 or 3 times a week, just to catch up on the current debt. Right now, we have 33,899,000,000 national debt. There is another US total debt down here where you can see my mouse, if you can see it. We had a total of 103 trillion in debt. And it doesn't get any better. You know, you see all these red squares on here, right? It's just ugly. If you want to just go to usdebtclock.org, you can download the app, but you got to pay for it. But this is free. You can go back and look in time, the time machine. Over to the right, this is something I wanted to show you. The US debt clock, since maybe the last few months, they've been showing a secret window. And the secret window is, voila, is that, right? That thing pop up. And they've been sort of like what do you call those little things? The not riddles, riddles too. But what you call that in the old school newspaper ad where you watch the little cartoonist, they do their thing in the newspaper in the old days. Well, they're doing something like that. I think it's once a week on a certain day, they come up with a new riddle. Nobody knows who's behind US debt clock or anything. And people trying to figure out the message that they're trying to relay. This is not the only one, but they've been doing a bunch of these, and it's the talk of Twitter. It's all over Twitter. If you go on to Twitter and just look, you can find a bunch of comments and everything that everybody's trying to figure out on these. This one right here, let me blow this up just in case you can't see it, because I can barely see it. This one right here says reality collision. You can see this is CERN up here, and they symbol and whatever else is going on in CERN. So we've just completed another mega test, and we couldn't be happier with the result. What exactly are you testing? We're opening up a tiny wormhole. I got a picture of it. Holes into the reality matrix. Don't you think that could be dangerous? No, not really. What's the worst that could happen? You could plunge the Earth into a parallel reality and mess up the space-time continuum. And then, for me, when you look at what they say down here, this is what your average person is doing. It says people are so distracted they won't even notice. This is supposedly CERN or whoever's behind this talking about us, everyday people. And you see the symbol right here? I don't even want to talk about that, but yeah, that's a goddess or a god or whatever. People are so distracted, they won't even notice. Oh yeah, where did the S go in depends? Or did the S in depends go? Right? So people just rather talk about nothing, watch football, go out and get drunk, at a club or something, especially these youngsters, or go get a new booty. You know how they do it these days. They come out with new booties. I don't get it. Maybe y'all can tell me something I don't know. But whatever. So I just wanted to go through a couple of clips. This is another one. Let me resize. I don't need to resize. I can click it, I think. There we go. This is another one. I'm not going to read it, but this is just to show you, the different types of thingamajigs they coming out with. Riddles, if you want to call them that. Picture riddles. And like I said, these are from Twitter, all kinds of discussions going on what they mean or what they could possibly mean. The one thing I can tell you this is they've been doing this US debt clock for a while, right? And you can see we got a problem right here. When can your household run a heck, how about a $10,000 debt, let alone 33 trillion? You can't. All right, you'll be homeless. Welcome to America. Here's another one right here. They got Dorothy on the yellow brick road. It said Debt and Money City, the United States Federal Reserve System. Yeah, so you got to kind of put them all together, and you can kind of paint your own picture of what they're trying to tell you. But pretty much they're trying to tell you that this country is in trouble, a whole lot of trouble, which leads me to this next slide, right? It says Cunningham, Rob Cunningham. On this epic day in history, the petrodollar, Federal Reserve, debt, slavery, and fiat capitalism all took a death blow. The new era is now. If you haven't been paying attention, please look closely into the BRICS and what Saudi Arabia just did. I believe they had joined officially on in January, probably the first of the month. I'm not sure if it's the 1st or the 15th, but they joined in January. And they've already said that they won't be accepting US dollars for oil. That was the deal made back in 1971 when President Nixon. That deal stood for over 50 years. It is done. It's over. So we have to be very careful what we do in our future from here on out. The new monetary order will be based on multi-currency mercantilism, a construct where every nation creates and manages its own sovereign metals-backed currency and prioritizes the wealth and well-being of its own people first and foremost. As I don't know if this make any sense to y'all, but basically what they're saying is you can see African countries doing it already, India, other countries. They're going to their own dollar. They're saying, hey, we're going to use our own dollar. And then they're beginning, it's not in full swing yet, but they're beginning to back their currencies by precious metals and commodities such as gold, silver, right? So this one has a video clip. I'm not going to talk to you too much because I want to ride you out on this video clip. It's pretty good. I'm not going to read all of this. You can read it. I can put a link in the description. But it's pretty wild. I will read this though. You know what? Let me read this for you. So the video clip begins below, highlights the power, speed, versatility, decentralization, soundness, safety, and growth acceleration aspects of multi-currency mercantilism, which has been long proven to enrich the wealth of nations versus profiting a tiny few, profit-seeking banker capitalists. If you don't know by now, our entire government is overrun by banking. Central banks mainly, not just our government, other governments abroad, central banks mainly, and corporations. They then teamed up together with the government, and they working as one against me and you. All right. So I'm gonna skip this piece. A new world must begin with a new vision to build new wealth, global abundance, honest money, fair trade, and inflation-free economies with zero incentives to fund military, industrial, military, pharmaceutical, or similarly, I can't say that word, perverted alliances hidden from public view. If you value DLT, transparency, accountability, interoperability, scalability, all these abilities and parencies in DLT, distributed ledger technology, all of these are blockchain. We're going to a blockchain tokenized economy in the future. That means everything that will be traded in the future will be a token. Doesn't matter which blockchain it is. It give you a list down here: XRP, XLM, XDC, HBAR, ADA, IOTA, Algo, and USDC. Doesn't matter. If you own these, the future will be run by tokens just like this. Notice I didn't mention Bitcoin. The future will be run by tokens just like this. And it will be a tokenized economy, meaning stocks, bonds, derivatives, whatever, gold, silver, wheat, barley, whatever you can think of will be tokenized, meaning you can take the value of a physical commodity or security, and you can represent that value on the blockchain. So when things become tokenized, everything will be tokenized and traded on ledgers. Okay. Nothing I've did I finish reading that? Did I finish yet? Yep. Permissionless. If you value DLT, transparency, accountability, interoperability, scalability, permissionless access, satellite security, and quantum resistant proof security, you're most likely a fan of blah. Nothing I've researched to date even remotely compares to all the encompassing brilliance and utility of the multi-currency mercantilism architecture and its ability to fully embrace, add synergies, and bring new scale I think you left out to the internet, a value we all seek to adopt. We'll soon be shifting a quantum gear towards the next stage of greatness. All right, y'all, I'm gonna walk y'all into this video. Well, I'm not gonna walk you, I'm gonna play it. And this is long, it's about, you can see it's 12 minutes long. I'm just gonna play it, and then I'm gonna close out on the video. Thank you. Bye.
Hello, I'm your last speaker of the day. I know that that makes you happy. I'm delighted to be here, and many thanks to Balaji. I am going to talk about multi-currency mercantilism. And this is the scary idea that the world moves away from the US dollar, which was 87% of all global transactions in 2021. But something broke in 2022, and now most of the world, 80 countries, have decided that they are moving to local currency trade in their own currencies and away from the US dollar. Now, my background, I started out at the place that creates the dollar, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And I was on the Settlement Systems Studies Group. Then I went and I dematerialized securities in London for the Securities Investments Board, and I supervised the two global depositories, Euroclear and Clearstream. And then I decided the systems we have aren't good enough. I'm going to build new ones. I mean, it's been great today listening to you guys talk about networks and charter cities and change, because I've done all of that. I went to Clearstream, where I got US Treasuries into Luxembourg, globalized US Treasuries, US dollar liquidity. I co-invented tri-party repo that now does $18 trillion a day in interbank secured credit. I built the first global derivatives margin optimization and got the patent on it, yay. I then went independent, because I had babies. So I went from my most productive period to a reproductive period, and I built CLS Bank as my first job as a consultant. That is now a foreign exchange clearinghouse that clears $7.5 trillion a day in foreign exchange settlements, $1,900 trillion a year. I then modernized Reuters, UBS, into 3 global data centers. As a weird favor for Andrew Bailey, who's now governor of the Bank of England, I built a payment system in post-war Iraq that went live in 10 weeks using data over satellite and laptops. And then, Charter City, hey, been there, done that, tick that box. Dubai International Financial Center. I went out in May of 2005. NASDAQ Dubai went live in September. We wrote the laws, we wrote the governance, we wrote the rule books. We got all of the banks on board. We wrote the settlement infrastructure. The gate was the only building in DIFC when I arrived. Just desert all around. And now it's a huge city. So yeah, charter cities, they work. And I've modernized 14 central banks with Intellect Design Arena, getting a central bank award, yay. So that's where I am now. I am also a founder of a fintech startup that's building the new global monetary order. So I'm going to walk you through how that's going to work. Basically, when the last monetary order, Bretton Woods, was designed in 1944, the United States had 80% of all global gold, the largest military, dominant military on the planet, and most of the GDP, half of all world GDP. That's no longer true, none of it. Now, the greatest economic activity is in Asia. That UG circle has more than half of humanity in it, and they're growing at between 5 and 8%. And they want a monetary order that suits them. So the world's changing. I'm not going to run through the history, but history is changing very, very fast. So now we're at the new monetary order, which I called multi-currency mercantilism. When I Googled it, 0 hits. Well, I didn't think there were 2 words in English that could get 0 hits. But the reason it's mercantilist is because the aim of a mercantilist system is for a state, a nation, to collectively increase its wealth through trade, through activity with other states. A capitalist system, the aim is for private wealth to accumulate, often untaxed and stateless. So that's the difference between mercantilism and capitalism. And last year changed everything, because the 12,000 sanctions that the collective West put on Russia broke the system. Other states looked at those sanctions and they thought, we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend our wealth from freezing, seizure, expropriation. And the way to do that is to move away from the dollar. And the key moment was in December of last year, when President Xi stood with the 6 heads of state of the Gulf Cooperation Council and invited them to trade oil in Shanghai for yuan, ending 50 years of the petrodollar. So I'm going to give you the happy news. This is all good. It's going to be okay. I know that the United States, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury are all terrified. And yes, it's going to change for them. There will be a new balance of power. But for the rest of the world, for the 7 billion people that have been largely voiceless in the institutions that ran the world under the dollar, they are going to be actually much, much better off. And the transition can be gradual and stable. It really depends on whether we have wider wars, unfortunately. If there's a war in the Levant that widens from Gaza, if there's a war in Asia over Taiwan or any other cause, the transition will still happen. It will accelerate, but it will become chaotic and unpredictable. So we're all better off if there's no war. The reason The reason it can be transitioned, yes, no more, thank you. The reason it can be stable, I'll just run you through the numbers. All global trade in goods, we're talking about physical things, all global trade in goods, $46 trillion. Now, I told you earlier, foreign exchange trade is $1,900 trillion. So 46 trillion is a very small part of that. And only half of that is dollar trade right now. So that's 26 trillion. So if, let's say, half of the dollar trade moves to local currency over the next decade, that's only 11.5 trillion? It's 23 trillion, but yes. So 46 trillion trade, $23 trillion, 11.5 trillion moves to local currency trade. As a proportion of global capital markets flows, it's only about 0.04%. Not very much. We probably won't even notice it unless there's a war and the shift becomes chaotic and the capital markets become destabilized. As long as there's no further wars, the capital markets will continue to trade mostly in dollar because 90% of the foreign exchange trade is against dollar, most derivatives margin is in dollar, most bond market, the treasuries are the largest bond market and they're dollar. So as long as there's no war, the rest of the capital markets can remain stable and we don't have to have a panic. Great thing about the new world that's coming, no new hegemon. We still have the United States. The United States will still try and throw its weight around by wars, assassinations, destabilizations, and all of that it's characterized the last 100 years. But the 80 countries moving towards a new world don't want a new hegemon. And certainly President Xi said at the latest BRICS summit that there is no hegemonic DNA in China, that China for 5,000 years has never been hegemonic, and it's not going to be hegemonic now. So that's good news. Globalization will accelerate. We hear all this stuff about de-risking, about friendshoring. It's nonsense. Globalization actually is going to accelerate as the BRICS countries and the other countries of the Global South do more joint development deals with each other and substitute other currencies instead of dollar. Right now, 30% of the global economy is locked out of the global economy because of dollar sanctions and OFAC sanctions. That 30%, which is Iran, Russia, Syria, Venezuela, Cuba, those countries can come in and engage with the non-dollar world. So that shifting to other currencies besides dollar means that they actually accelerate globalization. And that's a happy thing. And then initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative are having a huge effect on the capacity for productivity globally. Because there's more power plants, because there's better logistics, because there's more cooperation on development. It's accelerating globalization. Angel paradox, named for Sir Norman Angel. I'm a big fan of his. I've rented his house 3 times. He built it from bits of driftwood that he salvaged. He won the 1932 Nobel Peace Prize, for the insight that when developed economies, interdependent developed economies go to war and impose economic sanctions on each other, that the costs are shared between the sanctioner and the sanctioned, that both lose. Because when you sanction somebody's credit or contracts and disrupt commerce, that affects the value of all of your own credits, contracts, and commerce. And we've seen this so clearly in 2022, where treasuries have now lost their AAA credit rating, and people are avoiding accumulating treasuries because of the sanctions risk. So it's got Janet Yellen worried, it's got Jay Powell worried, and they should be worried, but the answer is don't sanction. And we've also seen incredible blowback for the technology sanctions on China, where Huawei has built an entirely new technology ecosystem in 3 years because of sanctions. And announced their new phone, which includes satellite connectivity, while Gina Raimondo was in Beijing. So the great news is there are better models for stability, resiliency, and inflation in the world that's coming. We may not like Russia, we may not like China. I actually think they're fine. But they have actually cracked monetary stability much better than the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the ECB. And Chinese bonds have been outperforming US Treasuries, which is really quite impressive. They're not a big market. They don't trade much outside of China. But the fact is that there are other models for inflation, for stability, beyond what we agree on in Basel. And that, I think, deserves study. And the new system, where we move to local currency trade, can promote that. Ghana announced earlier this year that it was going to buy its oil for gold. They produce gold. They have gold. Central banks love gold. 2023 is a record year for central bank gold accumulation. So Ghana thought, well, why don't we buy the oil we need with gold? Their inflation rate dropped by more than 80% from the announcement. So the inflation rate is still pretty high. It's like 30-something%. But compared to where it started the year at 169%, it's a vast improvement. So new systems that are based on barter or other currencies can actually help countries control inflation, promote development. And finally, the gold standard was absolutely a brilliant way to control inflation. If we go back to gold, it's probably good for us. The graph there shows the price of a Campbell's soup can in gold. Up until 1971, it was pretty much absolutely stable. But as soon as Nixon delinked from gold, the United States has had nothing but inflation. And so if we go back to gold as the basis of international monetary discipline, that's probably good. So gold comes back as a hegemonic asset. And we see the little cartoon is representing the fact that, that China is hurling its dollars at the United States, and the United States is hurling gold back at China. Gold is flowing east. There have been record purchases of gold this year. China has been buying gold every month and announcing it to the world. And they are not buying treasuries quite so much anymore. They're down to the same level of treasuries they held in 2008 at $807 billion. They've been reducing their exposure. So gold demand is up among central banks, and that indicates the direction of travel because they are the insiders. The biggest challenge to making the transition stable is debt. There are $307 trillion of debt in issuance, and that debt is becoming very expensive to service as interest rates rise. And emerging markets are feeling the pain because a lot of their borrowing is in dollars, and they aren't able to service at the rising rates. So there is going to be a big problem in making the transition stable and keeping growth positive and servicing debts. I don't know how that works, but I think we have to collaborate on it. Finally, good news on technology and infrastructure. The future is here. It's just not evenly distributed. I built some of it. You know, I built the tri-party repo system that is the interbank market in liquidity. I want to globalize that to every currency. I globalized dollars a lifetime ago. His name's Mason. I want to globalize every currency to be liquid in the interbank markets now. And that then creates a basis for a more equitable world where wealth doesn't concentrate with the 0.1%. Wealth can be more evenly distributed to those that produce it. And as the world's center of economic gravity moves eastwards, now is the time to make that a reality. So thank you. If you like that, I just published the book yesterday.